What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the STL Tones podcast. Abel here, and I am joined by none other than Lasse Lammert himself. Lasse, what's going on, man? How are you?
Hi, man. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. All things considered, with everything going on in the world, man, I'm actually doing pretty amazing. So,
yeah, it's fucking crazy, isn't it? Like, especially in the USA right now.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the USA right now is pretty insane. But how is it for you guys out there in Germany? Is everything okay over there?
Yeah, it's getting more relaxed. I mean, like we're doing the whole, like everyone does, or supposed to do, like the whole social distancing and mask thing. But it's almost back to regular life now. It was a bit tough the first like 3 months, especially if you have kids. Like now 3 kids. Had 2 kids back then, and like with the kids being at home, not being able to go to kindergarten or daycare, it was a bit stressful, and was hard on the kids too because they can't see their friends and anything. So that was a bit tough, but now it's pretty much back to normal. Like wear a mask when you go shopping, and that's pretty much it. And so yeah, all good here.
Good, yeah, definitely. Here, it's been interesting here. It's been up and it's been down, up and down as far as people being scared of everything. So it's you never know what's going to happen, man. I went out there one day and just felt like it was all over, and then I went out the next day and it's all back. So you never know what's really going to happen. But what have you been doing to keep busy creatively? Have you still been working with bands throughout this whole thing, or have you been separated from most of your clients and people that you've been working with?
I've done a bit less. I'm doing a lot of like remote mixing. Ben sent me stuff and I mix, and I was supposed to mix like 3 or 4 albums starting like late March, and Ben's couldn't send me the stuff because they couldn't get into the studios to finish vocals or guitars or whatever. So there was a bit of a like down period really where I didn't really have that much to do. I still had work and I still mix a little bit. It kind of actually worked out well because, like I said, the kids were at home, and so I had more time to spend with them and just do a little bit of mixing. And now everyone's going back into the studios and sending me stuff, and so now stuff keeps flooding in, and I'm just like swamped. But that's good. So back to work. Yeah.
Yeah, being swamped is always a good thing. So because I was gonna, I knew I was gonna end up doing this, and so I listened to a lot more Alestorm than I normally would, which meant that I end up drinking a lot more than I normally would.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah, that's leading to my question, because it's amazing how just listening to the music, I put the music on, and my friend comes over and we make videos, obviously for STL Tones, and we make just videos in general for YouTube channels. And so I put it on. I was like, dude, I want to have a beer so bad right now. Like, I just want to drink as I have it on. It's just such a fun band to listen to. It's such a fun like type of music. It's like a bunch of drunken like just party songs. You know what I mean? But heavy metal, which hasn't really been there before. So
it's fun to record too.
How? So sorry. No, it's okay. What's that process like working with them? Are they as fun as they sound through their music?
Absolutely. I think the first one we recorded in 2007, so that's 13 years now. Wow. So yeah. And we've kind of evolved together. So the first one, like, it was essentially my band playing the stuff because, either the guys couldn't come over because there was no budget, or they just some of them just weren't good enough, to be honest. So they just came to my place, and we just improvised stuff here, really. Like, they had the songs pretty much written, but no one had an idea where it's going to be going and how we actually should approach this. And it kind of developed from album to album. And we've kind of come up with our, I think, pretty much, it's more or less like a unique way of doing things. And the more recent albums, the thing is, the album cycle, where the band comes here in January, and as much as I like my hometown here, Lübeck, it's not so pleasant in January because it's freezing cold. Mm-hmm. And the band didn't like that either. So as soon as there was a budget to do something, we just decided, or the band decided, to just go some place nice to record. So the last one, No Grave But the Sea, we did in Florida, actually, just to like rent it like a Airbnb house with a pool and just had a good time. And the last one we did in January this year in Thailand at Krabi Road Studios, and it's like you rent like a villa and a studio, and the whole compound is just amazing. You've got the pool is literally 15 meters from the studio, and so it's a lot of sitting around in the sun and drinking cocktails and just having a good old time. So yeah, that's definitely fun. But as much fun as the music is, and as not serious as it sounds, the musicians are really good now, and they're actually taking the music seriously. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean they take themselves too seriously, or what I'm trying to say is they don't think they are pirates, and some of their fans, that's what some of the fans have a problem with. Like they expect them to be all dressed up with an eye patch and stuff, and they just don't take themselves too seriously. But that doesn't mean that they don't take the music seriously. They're all really accomplished musicians and good at what they do, and they're really good songwriters. Especially Chris is doing a lot of the songwriting, and he's also writing for Glory Hammer and some other stuff, and so he's got a very unique way of writing, which is very, I'd say, pop. It's a pop approach. That's why it's so catchy. He doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything. It's just he does catchy shit, and that's what people like, really. Get drunk and sing along and just have a good time. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think sometimes, like now, it's very hard to convey an emotion whenever you're writing a song, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. You sit down and you say, I want to write this type of a song. By the time you actually get into the song, it's just what was in your head is not what actually comes out, and it doesn't end up being that way. So the fact that he and the band themselves have the ability to take that music and really sort of produce that message of like, this is happy, this is fun, we're all having a good time. But if you listen to number one to the riffs, because I'm a guitar player first and foremost, so if you listen to the riffs, they're amazing, they're technical, it's heavy metal. The drums are following. You got really tight double kick going in there when it needs to be in there, and it sounds really good. So it's such a crazy dynamic of actual talented musicians playing music like pirates that are having a drunken good time. It's such an amazing mix. I think it's not really something that's out there very much right now.
And it sounds very simple. People are like, oh, this is anyone can play that, but it's actually not. It's actually some of it is quite challenging to play. Not only the guitars, but the other stuff as well. I had to play like one of the albums. Which one was it? I don't know. I didn't have a guitarist, so I had to play all the guitars, and I was like, okay, this is not as simple as I thought it would be. And some of it is quite challenging. And we've got some good musicians coming from outside as well, like all the brass is real instruments, for example. And there's a music school, university actually in Lübeck here, and I'm getting some of the brass guys from there. So all the brass is real, and we had Ellie from Subway to Sally do all the violin parts, and there's a hurdy-gurdy player, Hetty Gurdy. She's doing hurdy-gurdy stuff and did a little bit of clean vocals as well. So what we usually do is we just record the core band, like this time in Thailand, for example, just the drums and guitars and bass and then vocals. And then I get the stuff here and just record the other guys, the extras in my studio, and mix them in. And all those are professionals too, usually. Wasn't always like that, but now this is kind of how it's working, and it's working out, I think.
So what's your general approach to basically starting, let's say you're going to start an album, you know what I mean? And you're going to start tracking songs. Where do you go first? Do you try to get drums tracked first? Do you try to get guitars tracked first? Where do you start?
Usually it's the drums for me. Sometimes, like this time, for example, it's a good example. In Thailand, I want to do the same thing, but we had the drummer Pete. He's got a massive kit with a lot of like extra auxiliary splashes and double hi-hats and all sort of stuff. So I needed some extra mics, and Aston Microphones sent me a few, or well, were supposed to send me a few, and they did, but they kind of got stuck in customs. So we had to wait like almost 2 weeks for the mics to arrive. So I had to start with other stuff first. And I think this time we recorded guitars first. The songs are pretty much finished already. So they've got like their Guitar Pro skeleton that we can use as a guide track or something. So that works. So this time was a bit backwards, but usually I like to record drums first, because it's when the other instruments come in, it's easier to vibe on drums, I think. to just instead of just to play to a click or program drums. And then I usually start with guitars after drums. The main reason for that is I've got 4 guitar tracks, or 2 at least, for rhythm guitars, and 1 bass track. And bass players usually tend to fret a bit sharp, and often can't hear that. If you don't have guitars in, you don't even hear that the bass is a little bit sharp.
Right.
And then the guitars come in and everything is just off. So it's easier for me to have the guitars in and then record the bass, because it's A, easier to hear, and B, easier to tune the bass to the guitars than the other way around. Plus, to be honest, most of the time guitar players know the song better than the bass player. And it happens all the time that like you've got the guitars recorded and then the bass is like, oh, that's what you're playing. I thought it's an F sharp. It's an F really. Oh, because part of the reason is because bass players, and also like you can't the pitch is not as easy to recognize on the very low notes, especially if you've got your rehearsal room scenario and the bass is just like rumbling along. You often can't even hear if you're like half a note off. So it's good to have the guitars, which are definitely correct as a foundation for the whole thing. Right. So then I usually do the bass, because the bass is, in my opinion, pretty important for the singer to get the pitch and the vibe and the groove. And yeah, after the bass is usually the singer, but it also depends a bit on how much time we have and what type of vocals it is, and if the singer needs rest. So I often try to give this singer some rest days, or even just do half a day and then do leads and do another half day and then do some keyboard overdubs or whatever, just to have his like voice in the best possible state, really. Yeah, that's it. Just pretty much standard for a rock band, I think.
Right. How do you go about dialing in a guitar tone? Like, let's say they haven't really settled on an exact guitar tone before they came into the studio. What's your process for sitting back and saying, all right, let's go and try this out first. Let's figure this out and figure out what guitar tones you guys want. How do you approach that?
Usually I like to have at least a rough direction of where we're going with the sound, even before I start marking drums. Like I want to know what sort of tones do you guys like? Give me reference CDs or whatever. It doesn't mean we're trying to match that, but just to have, like if they want Pantera and I'm trying to get Killswitch Engage and it's totally different, everyone's going to be, well, not happy in the end. So I want to like have a rough roadmap of where we're going tone-wise. And then it's usually pretty clear what I'm using guitar-wise is I usually have like 3 or 4 heads in mind, and 1 or 2 cabs depending on what they want. I've got like the characters, the basic characters of the cabs I associate with the colors usually. Mm-hmm. And that's how I approach a mix too. It's like I want this more purple or more blue, and like if I want a lighter blue, I move the microphone a bit more towards the center. And so I'm kind of mixing by colors in my mind anyway. And so once I get these reference mixes, I do have a general color already. And that's how I choose amps, because my amps have colors too for me. Mm-hmm. And so often I just pick those 2 or 3 amps and cabs and just dial in a tone I like, which is usually pretty quick, and then reamp a short section and just do a blind test, just solo one or put it in the mix and just cycle through them and see what works best. But to be honest, people expect kind of some magic there, and it's really very, very simple. And I was like, people are going to be disappointed if I tell them what I'm really doing, because it's all I'm doing is like you put a 57 in front of a vintage 30 and that's it. So there's no magic to it really. And well, I guess, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I know my cabs inside out, and that might be the secret, because if you do something for like forever, it becomes second nature to you. And so it seems very natural for me anyway. I just put it there and it sounds good. But maybe that's because I've been doing it for like forever.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception that's going on now is the fact that there's so many different people. So they take somebody like you and then all the other main artists that are out there now, but there's so many different ones that people are constantly trying to figure out, how are they getting their sound? How do they know what they need to do to put on a record? And if you actually ask everybody, the first thing they're going to tell you is like, look, until you guys told me it sounded great, I didn't know if it was good or if it wasn't. I just thought it sounded good and I put it through, and this is just kind of what I do now. You know what I mean? So I think it's people are always going to expect that magic to be there, because they, you know, the same thing when I first started, it's the same thing. I was like, man, how does he know what sounds good? Like, how does he know what to dial in, where to take out mids, where to bring in bass? Like, where is the guide that I'm looking for to figure this out? And it's like, no, you just listen to it, you record it. And I think that what I'm getting back from all the producers, guitar players that have some of the most legendary tones, it's always the same thing. I thought it sounded good, so I recorded it. You know what I mean? And then I just kept doing it.
I think the main thing you should have is a picture of where you want to go and the knowledge or experience how to get there. And the tools you're using on the way is just it's really just that, as tools, and no preset is going to work 100% for everything, really. Like Andy Sneap, for example, I've always been like his biggest fan, still am.
Right.
And so I visited him, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. I got his old desk and so sat in with him, and he just showed me one of the mixes he was working on. I think it was Hell back then, his own band. And he just walked through the tracks and just showed me the plugins and the stuff. And I was like, wow, that's all the same shit I'm doing. There's nothing magical about it, really. But it fucking sounds awesome in the end. So it's definitely not his tools. It's definitely just... And he couldn't really answer either. Like, he couldn't say, oh, this is the magic thing. It's just, well, I just thought that sounded good, so I just put that in. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's what it is. Like, there's no shortcut to just getting that experience or even the courage to just fucking crank that thing. Like, for example, I'm now working on a mix that I'm usually, when I'm doing metal or modern metal stuff, you need all the space you get, especially with bands like Groliam and Aidstorm and all those bands where you've got like layers and layers and layers of all sorts of stuff. Often you don't even hear it, but there's like synth and orchestras and all that sort of stuff that needs to fit in the same range. So you try to clean out as much space as you can with surgical EQs and compressors and filters and just fit everything in. And now I'm just working on a mix for another band with, don't even know of it. The band doesn't exist yet as a band, but it's like it's a rock star, all-star team, I'd say. So from bands I've been listening to when I grew up, like gods in my eyes, kind of. So I just recorded the thing, and I'm approaching this one more like a CLA mix, I'd say. So I just put like an SSL strip on every channel and just put it on the desk and didn't do any surgical EQ, just like broad strokes, just boosted high end on everything and just twisted knobs and really quick. And I sent them the first rough mix yesterday, and I was so scared because I was like, this is like going naked to a first date. Because she might like what she sees, but like the regular thing is to wear pants and a shirt,
right?
Or in other words, you put samples on and have everything clean and stuff. And this was because I'm not used to it. I'm not used to working this broad stroke, just vibe kind of alt rock, grungy kind of thing. And they turned out loving it, but it was really very self-conscious about it because it's not my usual approach to do stuff. But it's also good to just try something else every now and then, and it keeps you fresh. That's also, I like working out of different studios, for example. I do a lot of stuff in other places. Like when a band from the USA, sometimes it's better or cheaper for them to fly me in and rent a studio there than to come over with like 4 or 5 people. Same with, I've been to Thailand, to India and USA a couple of times and worked out of different studios. So you have to really, you're thrown into all sorts of different scenarios and situations and have to deal with them. And I kind of like that because it keeps you on your toes and it forces you to develop new ways around stuff, to improvise. And often that leads to something new and interesting rather than just having the same old mix template, preset or whatever, and just do the same thing over and over and over again. It also means that sometimes maybe you end up with a mix that you think could have been better if you had just used, the last band's mix template.
Right.
But I don't know. I feel like I know it's weird. It's just in my head probably, but I feel like I'm cheating if I'm using a template that worked for me because I want to have the tracks and the sound of the band and just do what I think is best for the band. And I can only do that if I do it like from scratch and just listen to the tracks and tweak what I think needs tweaking instead of using the same samples and the same whatever on it. So yeah.
All right, man, that's super interesting. I mean, I can't imagine like taking, you know, your comfort zone and then flying out to Thailand or wherever else you may be and be like, all right, I'm gonna basically record an album and a record and produce everything from here, where you're out, you're not with your gear, you're completely somewhere else, you're dealing with other stuff. Granted, obviously audio, you know, audio equipment is audio equipment. You have a basic idea of what's going on, but that's yeah, I think it's remarkable to be able to work like that in different places and just kind of take a blank, you know, template and start fresh and be like, well, I'm going to make an album out of this.
And it's so much fun too. First time I was in Thailand was actually ages ago now. It was like an orphanage in the jungle of Thailand, and it was after the tsunami hit, and we went over there with a couple of like German pop star musicians, and just went directly. It was in the jungle, like in a fucking bamboo hut essentially. And we brought a Mackie 8 bus, like an old desk with us, and a bunch of like one of those starter collection Sennheiser mics or something like that, whoever sponsored us. And when we arrived there, like we had to build this studio in this hut essentially. So I had to take we had a proper grounding problem, so I had to take like a big metal pole and like put it in the ground to get some grounding and to get rid of the hum. And the drums we had there was an old Pearl Export kit with heads were so beat up that I actually flipped the toms over and reused the bottom heads as beater heads. And so that sort of stuff. Or like the plan was to, there was nothing written before. We had, I think, 16 days there, or like a bit more than 2 weeks anyway, to record an album, shoot a documentary, and record 3 music videos, and write all the songs for that album too. And the plan was to do that with the kids. So kids were from like babies to 14 years maybe. And we wanted to just record and write songs with them, not knowing back then that their instruments, all the stuff we wanted to use, has nothing to do with our 12-tone system here. So it just, it wouldn't really fit naturally. So we had to, like, or the artist had to write music around those instruments and around what works there. And that was one of the best engineering experiences of my life, really, because it was so out there and so wild. Actually, like, I didn't even have a proper bed because there was some like mattress that was supposed to be my bed, but there were like loads of ants running over it, and that wouldn't go. So I just ripped after we had like those foam things on the wall that we put up there, like the thin, not so good ones. And every day after recording, I just ripped them off and put them on the ground, and that's where I slept. Yeah, and that was like one of the first times actually I went out and recorded out of my comfort zone, and that was like the most wild time you can imagine. And from there on, well, what else can happen really? Like it was as insane as it could get really, and it worked out, and the album did all right, and yeah, it was great. Well, like 4 years ago, I went to India for recording with a band called Inner Sanctum, really good thrash band, but also same thing, like we rented a place there, a recording studio, which was decent. But the whole, like if you go to places like Asia, people tell you to not drink tap water, something that's obvious, or not try to look out for ice in your drinks because you want one with a hole in the ice cube or whatever. But we were in the absolutely not in the touristy area. Like when I left the studio, I had like 25, 30 kids around because I was the first white person they saw, and the first white person with tattoos on top of that. And like I was so lucky that I had the band with me because they helped me out with stuff like even bottled water. They told me you can't drink bottled water there because they actually take the water bottles and just fill crappy water in there and then seal it off with like super glue or something, so it cracks again when you open it. Or even restaurants, like in that place, which wasn't touristy at all, you couldn't. They told me to not eat meat, like even if it's chicken, because it's probably not chicken, and stuff like that, which is quite interesting. So I like those kind of experiences.
That's incredible. Those were 2 amazing stories. I mean, I can't imagine there's that many producers that have gone and worked in those types of environments and have been taken that far out of their comfort zone. That's absolutely incredible, man.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Yeah, I bet. So just kind of switching gears here really quick. you've recently been working on a new pack for STL Tones, and I believe it's called the German Boutique pack, correct?
Yeah, correct.
How did you approach making the presets for that pack?
Quite different from the last one, because the last ones were all tones I either used in mixes already, or I just approached those exactly the way I would approach a tone that I'm going to use in the mix. So I usually had a boost and had it set so that I could just drop it into the mix the way I'm mixing. And people still seem to like that, but a lot of people also want a more like less tight, throatier tone maybe, which is fair enough. And a lot of people ask me for like more driftwood profiles, and I didn't want to just do a driftwood bundle, because I've got a lot of like of these German amps here, like Earforce, for example, that usually people don't have. And so I figured, why not just do like a German amp pack? And most of these German amps are somewhat boutique. So that's what I thought I should call it, just a German boutique pack. And first I wasn't sure if I should, because I like the Mesa cab, for example. It's like my favorite cab, and I wasn't sure if I should just use German amps and whatever cab I like. And then I decided, no, there are good German cabs too, like the Dietzel and the Engel and Wagner. Well, Wagner technically is not German anymore, but he's German and moved to California. So yeah, this is all German and no boosts. I did create some of the profiles with a boost in mind. So I created the profile, I tried a boost, I dialed it in so that it works with a boost, and then I took the boost off again and just profiled it with the amp without the boost. So you can use your green scream or whatever boost you want inside the Kemper or inside Tone Hub, or just use your external, that one, for example.
Yeah. I got knobs kind of stuff. I've had this one for a long time.
Doesn't need that. Yeah. So this pack is should be more versatile, but less. I think it's more versatile because you've got the good growly basic tones that you could use as they are, but they're also more flexible in terms of you can boost them with your own boost, or you can tweak them, EQ them to your liking. And they're all merged profiles, so you can swap cabs and amps, and for the Kemper one anyway. And for the Tone Hub, it's well, you got the separate cab miking section anyway, where you can use mics. And yeah, and I think you should have a lot of variation in there with that basic patch and Tone Hub to just move mics and get your tone from that and use different boosts. And I also tried every single patch and every single chain I created with different guitars, single coil Fenders, Strats and Telecasters, and Gibsons with low output pickups like old PAF type pickups, and EMGs and Fishman Fluence. So I tried every single chain with different guitars to make sure that the resulting sound is exactly what the amp sounds like with that guitar. So you don't get this, you need this guitar or that guitar with active pickups to get this profile or this patch to sound right. No, if you use your guitar and you get the exact same sound you would get from the amp if you use that same chain. So you really do get the sound of the amp. And that's also why I decided to not use boost, because I'm probably going to use a boost in a heavy context anyway, if it's like a faster thrashier band or something. But I wanted to give people the actual tone of the amp, the unaltered original tone of the band of the amp, as direct as possible and as chest punching as possible. So I hope I accomplished that, and well, we'll see.
Right. So, for people who may be watching or listening right now, what we're talking about right now, and I could be incorrect, I may be correct, but this may or may not be out when you actually watch or listen to this. This may be about a week ahead of time from releasing this pack. But what Lasse is working on is working on a German boutique pack for the Tone Hub plugin platform. So if this is before this gets released, then you're looking forward to an amazing pack that he has worked on and released. And if this is already out right now, then head over to STL Tones and check that out. And what he's talking about is this is going to be a pack that is largely full of presets that are unboosted amplifier models. So you're not going to have that traditional overdrive in front of each one of the presets. He wants to give you guys that, you know, that full experience of the amplifier and allow you to go in and add the overdrive. As you guys know, you've got about 3 different overdrives in that Tone Hub plugin platform. So if you want to shape your tone from there, you can definitely do that. You can shape that down. You can reduce gain, you know, shape up, you know, increase the bass a little bit, then throw that overdrive on top and tighten up that bottom end. But just in case you guys are wondering, that's what we're talking about. And, you know, like I said, when you guys are watching this, go ahead and head over to STL Tones and find out if it's going to be released soon or if it already is released. So, you know, kind of moving on to a different question, and we're already talking about gear. So what is your opinion right now personally on the current state of, you know, amplifiers and gear? Are you still buying new gear? Are you still trying new stuff as it comes out? Are you still excited about that? Or are you just really sticking with what you know?
I'm not as excited anymore because I'm on the one hand, I'm really OCD about every little detail, and I'm trying tons of different preamp tubes and different picks and all the tiny detail. And then the next day, I don't give a fuck, and I just switch the amp on and just record. And I'm moving more and more towards the latter, to be honest, because it was fun, and it still is fun to do all these shootouts and go into all these tiny little differences about stuff. But I feel sometimes it might take away a little bit of the creativity depending on where you are in your workflow right now. Like if I'm mixing, I'd rather get a mix going on real quick now, like just throw up the faders and get the mix going and just vibe through it, rather than spend 2 days finding the perfect combination of preamp tubes or something. So I'm not as excited about new stuff anymore when it comes to amps, because I mean, there are great amps out there, and I'm sure there are great amps that I don't know of and that are being released soon or built in some shed by some awesome genius tube guru. But it's all going to be just a different color of what I already have. And I've got so many colors now that I can really create any painting I want. So I don't feel like I need this neon sparkle amp, because I already have a sparkle amp and a neon amp, and I can create that neon sparkle tone out of that.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great way to put it. How you already have the colors that you know of to create whatever painting you're looking for. You don't need any new colors. You already know what you already have, and you can definitely create something on any canvas at this point. Do you have any bands that you're working with recently that are wanting to try? Maybe they have a signature sound that they've developed with a current amp or something like that, and you maybe have to move them over to a sound and say, hey, you know, this is a sound that I already know, as opposed to what they're going for. Have you ever had to steer anybody lately from the new stuff?
Well, I'm trying to not push my tones onto them. Like if they have their sound and they want to use it, I'm happy to use it. Mm-hmm. But usually the reason they come to me is because they like what I'm doing. So often that doesn't even come up. I had one case last year of a band from Macedonia, I think, and Hardface they're called, and they're amazing actually. And the guitarist, he's got his own company and he builds his own amps. So he sent me one because he wanted it on the record. And that was great. Actually, I was happy to use it, and it sounded great. Not saying I couldn't have achieved similar results or as good results, but another amp. But it was a great amp. He built it himself and he wanted it, so I used it. And I'm happy to do that. The problem is with when people suggest stuff they like, it's usually amps. It's never cabs.
Right. And
what they don't get is that, as much as I like being a nerd about amps, if we're being honest here, the amp is 10-20% of the whole chain. If that, like the cab makes a much bigger difference, and the miking makes a world of a difference. Like I've got, I don't know, 10 or 12 412 cabs here, all equipped with Mintage 30 speakers. So it's the same speaker. It's the same basic design of 4 speakers in an enclosure, but just slightly different dimensions. And those speaker caps all sound way more different from each other than all the amps do. And that's always a bit of the hypocrisy going on in well, I don't know if it's hypocrisy, but like buying amps is so much sexier than buying cabs. So everyone's going on about the new amp and the new amp is that awesome, and they're still using the same old cab. And yeah, I'm usually thinking like, just get a new cab, get a better cab, and you're going to improve your tone so much more. That's why I'm usually, when people, like, it never happened to me that someone said, "Oh, can you please use an Engel cab? I like those." But it happens all the time that they say, "Can you please use a rectifier? I love rectifiers." And if that happens, I try to tell them, "Well, I'm happy to use a rectifier if it works for you, but see that the tone is really in the whole chain. Let's just try what I think sounds best. I'll send you a rough mix, and if you don't like it, I'm happy to tweak it until you love it. I'm happy to use your stuff, but let's just see what really works best for the track or for the album, instead of just focusing on this one amp now that you happen to like that might not even work in this context."
Right.
But yeah, I'm not forcing my stuff on them, definitely.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I mean, that's, I have this, and I still have it, and that's because it's so cheap that if I sold it, nobody'd buy it. But a long time ago, I bought this 2x12 cab, and it was like $200 brand new. And this is when I didn't know anything about amplifiers and cabinets, but I knew that I'd been watching all these YouTube channels, and I'd been watching all these guys record stuff. And I was like, if I'm going to record stuff, if I'm going to start a YouTube channel, I have to have an amp and I have to have a cab. I can't just have plugins. So I bought this 2x12 cab. And it's probably the worst sounding 2x12 cab that's ever been made ever. It was $200 brand new, shipped to me. I got it like on water or something like that. And it shows up, and I get this PV 6505, or it was either the 6505 or it was a 5150. I can't remember, but it was the iconic amp, right? And I tracked one down and I bought it. And I was like, all right, well, if I have a 2x12 cab and I have a PV 6505, then
Trivium now.
That's it. I should have the world's greatest heavy metal guitar tone. And that's when I bought this thing, which is why it's so old, because I was like, if I have this, an amp and a cab, I'm pretty much set. And it sounded so bad. It sounded like shit. I was like, I don't understand why my guitar, it sounded really raspy. It almost sounded like you know how, like, if you have a plug-in and you don't have an impulse response loaded and it just sounds like crap, it sounded like that. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? So, and the whole time I was like, this amp is garbage, right? This amp is shit. So I went and bought another amp. And this time I actually spent some money on the amplifier. Same thing, right? Or it was a preamp pedal. It was a preamp pedal, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy this preamp pedal. I'll put that through. That'll fix the problem. And then eventually, I like started reading, started looking stuff up, and then I bought this Engel 2x12 with 2 vintage 30s in it. And now, no matter what I put through it, it sounds absolutely amazing. It doesn't matter what I put on top. I can put a really crappy head on it, and it sounds really good. So yeah, I nobody really ever brings up that point. So I thought it was great that you brought that up, that it is much sexier to buy a brand new amp. It is much more exciting to change the colors and the knobs and the tubes and whatever you have going on with all the technology they're putting in them. But nobody ever says, hey, why don't you change the cab first and let's get a new cab? Nobody ever says that. And my buddy's never like, hey, bro, you got to check out this cab I got. Like, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Kemper, for example, has been at the moment the biggest platform where people can upload their own tones. What that shows us is, let's take the rectifier, for example, because it's such a famous amp. There must be literally thousands and thousands of rectifier profiles.
Yeah.
And if it really would be the amp that makes the difference, they would all sound the same, but they sound so incredibly different from each other. And that's just because people mic it differently or use a different cap and stuff. It's really not so much the amp. And people still don't want to believe that. I actually did this little test with a, we have it here somewhere. No, like this little MS2 Marshall, the one with like a belt clip kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I actually converted the headphone out to like to a jack, and I plugged that into a bigger power amp just to get it loud enough, and used that, and it sounded like the best guitar tone ever. And then I went a step further and didn't even use the power amp. I just used the little 2 watt or whatever it is headphone amp and plugged that into Mesa 412 cab and used that in a mix. And that's actually on YouTube somewhere. And it sounds so big and so good from this shitty little amp. And people were just like, oh, no, that's fake. I said, no, it's not fake. It's just really... It's the cab and the mic that is a lot of the sound, really.
I think it's always going to be difficult to sell this huge wooden box with speakers in it that you have to move around. It's just never going to be that even with most major retailers, they're still going to charge you shipping. You know, God forbid if you go on Reverb or on eBay, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg. Like nobody wants to deal with a speaker cab, and nobody wants to admit that they need a new speaker cab. So I think it's going to be a long time before people finally make the switch and realize, hey, just get a new cab. your tone's going to sound. I think it's the same thing with mixers. Really, everybody addresses the wrong thing. Everybody just attacks the guitar tone full on ahead of time. Doesn't realize that, hey, if you actually listen to this with really good mixed drums and really decent bass, and then a slightly well EQ'd. I mean, you don't even have to really EQ the guitar tone that well. You have a dramatically different picture than you normally would if you just, but the guitar tone has to sound good, bro. I'm working on the guitar tone. I get that, but listen to the rest of it first and then see. You know, you'd be surprised what sounds good in the mix. You know, even with the guitars not being what you think they should be. So,
I think pretty much any record with an awesome guitar tone that people love, if they would just hear the guitar tone solo, they'd be like, "This is fizzy and thin and shit."
Exactly.
Like going back to Sneap, there, he's got arguably the best guitar tones ever, and I heard some of his rhythm guitar tone solo and I was like, okay, this sounds really bad if you just listen to it solo, because it's just scratchy and weird sounding, and in the mix it's just massive because it just that's the space it has. If you make it occupy more space than is actually available, you're going to mask the good stuff too. And so yeah, that like if there's a secret to getting good guitar tones, it's probably to create them with a mix in mind.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I think, you know, working with STL, since I've been making videos for them for the past few months, I've had more questions, and I've had a YouTube channel for a while, which I had questions, but never as many as with them, about people just trying to figure out, hey, what are you doing with your guitar tone? Because I'll make a demo out of a pack that they'll make or something, and they'll ask me all these questions about it. And it really just kind of brings light to the fact that people just don't realize that, look, honestly, 90% of the time, the guitar tone you think that is what's going to sound good in a mix doesn't sound anything like the guitar tone soloed by itself. And they'll listen to some of these presets and say, hey, how come that preset doesn't sound like it does on this album? And it'd be like, well, because on the album, it's not soloed. If you actually listen to this pack, let's say they take one of your presets in your pack and they say, this doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Like, but if you drop it into your mix and you kind of work on the mix a little bit, it's going to sound amazing. You know, so there's so many people that are just lost in just solely worrying about guitar tone.
Yeah. And what they don't realize is that in 80% of the scenarios or more, you are not by yourself. Like, even if you're not using ToneHub to mix records, if you're using it to play live or any guitar tone, even if it's a real amp, like the plan or the goal is always to play with a band, be it in a live context or in a rehearsal room or jam with your friends or on a record. Like, of course you have to practice at home, but no one's going to hear it. So it doesn't really matter as much if it sounds great. You just need a tone that gives you proper feedback so you can develop your technique and learn the song and practice and hear the mistakes. But eventually you're going to play with someone else, so that's the goal. And so it doesn't make much sense to have the guitar tone that sounds amazing if you just play by yourself, because no one's going to hear it. So who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And when you develop that tone, and I remember I had this tone for a long time. I had this, and I still have it. It's this Line Pod 6 2.0. And I think it's the same one that Meshuggah used to make their first album. So everybody thought, oh, you can get an amazing tone out of this, right? And so I created these tones, and I was a big lead player. I was super into Satriani at the time and just lead playing because the guy that I was playing guitar with was all into that. So I got into that too. And then I remember trying to play with a band with it, and I couldn't even hear myself. Like, no matter how loud I turned it up, I couldn't hear my tone. And I was like, what do you mean? This was amazing tone. I was playing at home, but it sounded like crap when you played it with people. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think
the same is true.
Go ahead.
The same for bass, actually. Like in a mix, you'll have to distort the bass much more than you think. Mm-hmm. And then you listen to it solo and everything like, this doesn't sound like a bass. It sounds like a guitar. Well, yeah, but if it sounds like what you think a bass sounds like, it won't work in the mix. It's just going to be muddy low end, and you're not going to have any note definition. So, yeah, I always try to approach things with a mix in mind. And I can I see how that doesn't work for everyone, and I can totally see how some people might think that what I think is good tone sounds thin, and that's fair enough. Like if they want to have a throatier or a bigger or a more muscular tone, well, use an unboosted one. use the German boutique pack, for example. But yeah, and then boost it to get it into the mix.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You know, whenever I have that argument with people and they say, "Oh, well, it should be," I want a big, really thick, heavy metal tone. I'm like, have you ever even listened to? Not asking you, but what I say to them is, have you ever listened to Cowboys from Hell? Because obviously people would assume that Dime and Pantera would be the epitome of what good heavy metal tone is. And if you really listen to the album, the guitar tone sounds like crap. Like the actual tone itself being brought into the spectrum of being like the first really big iconic heavy metal tone. It was very thin. There was no mids. It was very scooped. It was pretty much the opposite of how you would dial in a good heavy metal tone now. Right now, you have a ton of mids. You have a lot of presence. You want it to cut through the mix so that way you can cut the bass and you can make it fit right. And I'm like, I'm like, yeah, but you love that record, right? And that record is easily one of the most impactful records up there of all time with most guitar players and most guitar players of my generation. It wasn't even that great of a guitar tone. You know what I mean? Just goes to show you, it's not necessarily about the guitar tone, exactly what you did. It's what you do with it.
Mm. I'm getting a lot of requests on Facebook and email and stuff about guitar tones. Like, how can I get that tone? And which one of your patches do I use to get that tone? And just recently, someone asked me about the Metallica guitar tone and which patch they should use, which one of my tone up presets to get close to that. And he was describing it as quite different from what I think the tone is. And I happen to have the solo guitar tones for the Metallica albums, the Black Album, the other ones. And just sent to I gotta send you a snippet. It's just like a little snippet of just the rhythm guitars, and he was like, "Oh fuck!" So you see, I would not create a profile or a patch for you and sell you that because you would hate me. Like if I sent you that tone as a patch, you'd be like, "What a fucking asshole! You just ripped me off there."
Right.
But yeah, that's what it sounds like in the mix. Then it sounds great with the bass and everything, but you have to be still like all that in mind. I still want to give the people the stuff that I'm actually using and not just play the whole psychoacoustic game and give them something they immediately love. Because, in the end, it's my name on there, and they're going to be like, okay, this doesn't sound like the mix. So I want to give them what I'm using and what I like because it's working. And it would be so easy to just get the thickest, densest guitar tone, and it would work for them live or in the mix or something. So I can't put my name on there.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's just a matter of education. And I think people will come around. When I made a demo video for them, I made on the Mark Lewis pack. I'm a big fan of Mark Lewis and all the bands I work with.
Absolutely, good guy, an amazing pack. Yeah,
definitely. So I took one of his presets. Can't remember which one it was, but I took the preset. I recorded my guitars left and right and just dropped it in as is onto the onto itself. And I think people are even overcomplicating the process of mixing a track at home. I am not a mixing engineer, producer. I am nowhere even close. Like, I'm lucky if I can even figure out how to use Cubase on a good day. It's like I just dropped it on there, recorded my stuff. I barely learned how to use my drum programs and stuff, and I put it out. Right? And they're like, "Oh, well, I guess, but you must be using compression. You must be using this. You must know how to use all this stuff." And when I put it out there, nobody moved me. I said, "Look, first of all, I didn't use any compression whatsoever because I don't know how. Right? I don't know the right context to use it. I don't know how to. I barely know how to write automation. Like I know how to volume something up. That's about it, right? I don't know how to do anything else. I'm not going to compress the drop. I don't know how to bring out the high end. Like I don't know how to do any of that. So when they DM me on Instagram and I say, "What do you mean there's nothing on it?" What do you mean there's nothing on it? There's nothing. There's no compression. There's no after EQ. There's no master fader, buses, or anything like. It's just two guitars, bass, and drums. And that's just how good the Mark Lewis pack sounds. That's it.
That's how it should work.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I'm like, usually just fade us up. It should sound in the ballpark. It should sound decent. And then you can fine tune. If it doesn't sound decent already, the source material isn't good. If you have to start by default, compress everything, something's wrong in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that highlights just how I don't know how your mind works, man, and I don't know what you did to it, or how, like, some of you guys, Will Putney and Mark Lewis, and you obviously, how you guys, your brain attaches to gear and to mixing, and how you approach all these things, and how your brain just splits itself off in a million different places when you're actually putting something like that together. So hats off to you, man. You do an amazing job, and it's something that a lot of people can do. You know what I mean? So it's pretty crazy. I'm super stoked about the pack that's coming out for sure.
Oh, happy. By the way, just going back to the 8-tone thing, just remembered all the lead tones and all the solos on that album were actually ToneHub preset, and it's one of the presets in my pack. It's called, I think, Silky Solos.
Oh, really?
And we used that, and it ended up on the album. I didn't reamp. It was before ToneHub was released. I got the beta version, obviously with my sounds in there. And we just used that patch, the Silky Solo one, and that ended up being the solo patch for the whole album. And I'm still quite happy with it. So
that's awesome.
Using it.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, if you're using, I think it's an explanation enough, and I think everybody kind of just assumes there's more, magic to be done before it makes it to an album. But I think when you realize that if you're using your own presets to put out your own albums that they can actually purchase on ToneHub, I mean, it's coming directly from the source right now. They're good presets. They sound amazing. They sound really good.
I'm using them all the time. Like, if I'm reamping, or when I'm reamping, which I'm doing, it's mainly not because the tone-up stuff doesn't work for me. It's mainly because what I said earlier, I want to approach everything from scratch and to create a new tone for the band. So I rarely use, for a new album, I rarely use rhythm guitars that I used before. So I probably wouldn't record all rhythm guitars and use that with an existing preset or patch. But I definitely use it all the time for like little overdubs and crunchy things, and that often ends up on the album as well then. Because I feel like if all these little extra ingredients you throw in, like this little lead overdub stuff, that's more about the arrangement than about the like the uniqueness in that is in the songwriting and the arrangement. Why you throw in this sparkly little lead, and it's not necessarily, oh, this lead needs its very own unique tone that's never existed before. So I'm happy to use a preset or a patch for that sort of stuff. I would be happy, like if I wouldn't have the chance to reamp and create my own tones, I would happily use the toner presets on an album as well. Like the reason I'm not doing it is simply because I got like 35 amps here and 12 caps, and I don't have to.
Right, exactly, yeah. But that's exactly why we would be going to you for those presets. You can't, because we're getting it directly from the source. That way I don't have to buy a 35 amplifiers if I figured that whole thing out and buy.
Exactly.
I tried it once. I tried using a microphone to mic up my angle cab. It was a big disaster. I'd rather just use your presets. I promise. It's just so much easier. It's almost like you guys are just kind of wired to be able to take a million things and put them together somehow, almost like a big puzzle. Because I've sent off files myself to have them mixed or whatever, and even I'm exporting my own files and I'm lost. I'm like, wait, what do I do? Like, is this? And then I'll look at them in a file or in a Dropbox file, and I'll be like, I have no idea what goes where anymore. I'm lost. Like, I got lost 6 tracks ago. Like, I have no clue where anything is.
I'm still doing the same. Like, you label the files final, capital letters, final, exclamation mark, absolutely this one. And it's just going to go until we've got like file names like this, and it's just 10 times final and 20 times swear words. And I'm doing the same, yeah. But I don't know. I think it takes a certain amount of weird and crazy to even work in this profession, like on music in general. Like if you decide that's your job, music, something is wrong with you anyway.
Yeah. I think that, like, from my standpoint, because I want to be involved in music, right? I want to play guitar and I want to be involved in music. I don't want to do all the work in between that. You know what I mean? I don't want to. I never want to be the guy sitting at the chair, being the one who has everybody resting on their shoulders, and we're like, yeah, well, I'm here to play, but you're the one that's supposed to make me sound good. You know what I mean? So I've always tried to.
It's kind of combining those two words, because you definitely have to have that creative approach and a creative mind, like you do have as a musician. And I think with that creative approach to things come a lot of problems, really. because the more the more creative you are, the more this whole process is a part of your life, the less organized your life is probably going to be. Because there are very few people, I think, that are very organized and very clear and structured, but also are very creative. I mean, they might exist, but I'd say the majority of the musicians is all over the place. And our job is kind of to tie that together, whilst at the same time also being a fucking mess. And so we have to kind of organize, like getting the best out of the musicians. And that's actually where I see my main job in the process, is not to get the best snare tone or to get the best guitar sound. I think my job is done, like, if the musician leaves and says, like, this was the best performance I could do, or this song turned out the best it could. That's when I think I've done my job. So my job is to get the musician to deliver, but also to read the musician, to know what he's capable of and how to get there, which is very, very different from one person to the next, obviously, because one guy you have to yell at for hours to just do that, and the next person, if you just yell at him, he's going to break down and cry and not do anything anymore because he's going to be too, I don't know, scared. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, what a lot of this job is, combining this creative process and putting it into order of some sort.
Kind of moving on from talking gear and kind of nerding out on that stuff. I see you're wearing a Nevermore t-shirt. I'm a huge Jeff fan. So who influenced you first to really start getting into metal music and start your progression as becoming a producer?
Metallica, I guess. Like, I'm born 1980, so when I started listening to metal, I started pretty young, I think. It's like the oldest picture of me with a Sodom shirt is 88, so I was like 8 years old and had like the Source of the Law Sodom shirt, and that's when I started listening to metal, and it was Metallica for me. Like, I've always been a huge Metallica fan. And then in the mid 90s, when I was like 14 or 15, I got into like death metal, Godfest and stuff like that, and black metal and Marduk and all that sort of thing. And was actually like the first signed band I was in was a black metal band, like 1998 or something. And yeah, and then it's always been Metallica and then In Flames. I do like, although I just said black metal and death metal, I do like some melody in my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always liked the In Flames stuff, even the newer stuff, like the Come Clarity and stuff like that people love to hate. I like big pop choruses.
Right. And
Nevermore for me was one of those bands that I really always loved for like all the reasons. Like, the production was spot on, was Andy Sneap,
right.
Like the later ones anyway. The first one I heard was the first one Sneap did, the Dead Heart in a Dead World, which is still like the best record.
Oh, yeah.
And the guitar playing is amazing. Jeff Loomis is an absolute beast. I love the song. I love how they combined like the melodic qualities, and they had their own unique sound with all the brutality and metal and shred and everything. So I've always been a huge fan.
So obviously everybody's been kind of cooped up lately. Everybody's been stuck at home, and you said you've been working from, remotely. People have been sending you stuff to mix. But when you haven't been working on anything, is there anything particular you've been listening to? Is there any metal bands that you've been really into in the past, couple of months?
Stuff I'm working on, or in general?
Oh, just in general. Just you're bringing out your phone and you found a band, like you somebody you didn't really listen to before, but you listen to them now and you're like, oh, this sounds amazing.
Not so much really, because I've got difficulties separating the sound from the music now. Like, the stuff I listened to 20 years ago, In Flames, Nevermore, Metallica, whatever, that's always going to be great. But the new stuff, I often can't tell if I like it because it's well produced and it sounds good, or if I actually like the music. And It's hard for me to listen to that with the regular consumer perspective. Like, if I listen to a new band, I can't just enjoy it. It has to sound good, and then I can enjoy the music too. Every now and then that happens, but since I'm working so much with metal and music every day, I usually listen to audiobooks when I'm in the car, or podcasts, or weirdly enough, shitty modern country, which also comes from like the. I don't know. It was weird. Like when we recorded in Florida, the Yatestorm one, on the way to the studio, we listened to what is it, like K94.3 country whatever, and a lot of like Florida Georgia Line and
right.
John Party and stuff like that, and like started listening to it like kind of ironically, and then figured out, well, this is essentially very well written pop songs, very well produced.
It's pretty much
yeah, and it's not like the music I love, but like if I listen to it now, it kind of puts me back into that driving under palm trees to the studio kind of mood.
Mm-hmm.
So every now and then I listen to stuff like that, even if I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I kind of enjoy it. And so yeah, when I'm listening to metal, it's usually like my old 80s, 90s playlist, or Judas Priest, which is one of my favorite bands. But it's not really underground or new. So no, not really. But Sylosis would be a band that I would absolutely recommend. And I think they are criminally underrated. Josh's playing guitar in Architects now. And his own band is Sylosis. Like if you haven't heard them, check him out. They're amazing. He's a killer guitar player.
I'm always on his YouTube channel. I love his guitar tone.
And a great guy too. He's nice.
Player.
Yeah. I like how he. I think the last one was tuned down a bit, but most of the stuff was tuned to E standard, like the previous record, and it still sounds so heavy, and it kind of shows how the riff is what makes it heavy, really, and not the tuning. But it is much harder to write heavy stuff in standard tuning because you actually have to write good riffs instead of just chugging away on a low string. And I really appreciate Sylosis for doing that perfectly.
Yeah, that was a big thing when he was making, when he was making that record, and people really started taking notice of Sylosis, and the first thing everybody talked about was the fact he wasn't drop tuned, right? He wasn't. Not only was he not drop tuned, he wasn't even like in D. He was just in standard. And so when it was like, and that's the first thing everybody said, it was like, hey, that just goes to show you. You don't have to have 8 strings. Don't get me wrong. I like extended range guitars as much as the next guy. I like messing around with 7 strings and writing a heavy song now and again. But another good example is like Trivium. Their first big record, they had it From Embers to Inferno, but then they ended up having, Ascendancy. And when Ascendancy came out, that was not a really epically low record. I think they were just they were in drop D, I believe. They weren't even in drop C, and drop D in it, and it sounded extremely heavy, and the riff sounded really, really good. But yeah, that's a perfect example. Every time, I think Sylosis is now forever connected with being able to be very heavy and not having to, really drop tune that low.
It's criminally underrated. Like they should be much bigger than they are.
Oh, definitely.
Another band I would recommend is actually one I mixed last year called Sublime Eyes from Norway.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really good. They're not big yet at all. But they're kind of, if you like At the Gates, The Haunted, All in Flames stuff, you're going to like Sublime Eyes too.
Yeah.
And they're really good. I would recommend those.
Oh, definitely. I'm a huge Ola Englund
right.
and all those guys. I'm a huge fan of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Always been a big fan. I remember the first song I heard from In Flames was Cloud Connected. And I don't know why I ended up listening to it. I just did it was when YouTube was getting big, and somebody, it wasn't even their video. Somebody took the song and just put like a picture of a guitar or something like that. And I was like, what is this, Cloud Connected? The name just sounded cool. So I clicked on it. And then I immediately downloaded the record and started listening to all their stuff. And all the way up to Come Clarity. I mean, I thought Come Clarity was an amazing record. Like, I thought the cover was super cool. That guy just has his heart torn out and he's standing there to cover that record. I mean, I was super into that stuff, especially that led me into Soilwork. And there was like another spin-off band too, with like Disharmony Mundi or something. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it led me into a whole Swedish metal after that.
There's another band I'm mixing right now, actually, that is quite cool too, called Communic. And they're very, if you like Nevermore, you might like Communic too. Mm-hmm. So that record's going to come out, I don't know, probably can't spell that now, but I'm mixing a new one right now, and that's going to be cool too. From Norway as well. Huh?
There's so much good music right now.
There's so many music. I wish I could just listen to it more and enjoy it more. Like every now and then I make an attempt to try and enjoy listening to music again, the way I used to when I was a kid, which is probably impossible because you listen differently. Like you had your 2 cassettes or 4 CDs or whatever, and you knew them inside out, and, in bed, like pretending or thinking, imagining yourself on stage, singing along or whatever, and you knew everything inside out. And now you got your playlist with like awesome music, but it's 20,000 in there, and you've got it on shuffle, and you just don't listen the same anymore. And that's, for example, why I think what's good about vinyl, like going off on a tangent here, but people keep referring to vinyl as like the holy grail sound-wise, and it's not. It's in fact, it's limited compared to CD and stuff, because you have to reduce the high end, you have to like mono the bass so the needle doesn't jump out. But what it does, it means you have to actually take this thing out of the sleeve and just put it on the player, and you can't just skip. So you have to listen, and it makes you sit down for a good while, even if it's not the whole album. You're going to sit down for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever and listen to music. And it makes you appreciate it in a different way, I think, compared to having an iTunes playlist on shuffle. And every now and then I'm trying to get into that mood again, which is very difficult for me now, to just sit down and listen to music as a consumer and just like the music. And I'm very jealous, actually, of everyone who does that. And it's a bit of the curse of the job, I think, because people keep telling you to like find what you love and do it, and you don't have to work a day in your life or whatever it's called. And it's kind of not true, because you risk ruining what you love. I'm not saying I don't like music anymore, but at some point it becomes a job, and it's not all fun, and you kind of start losing your appreciation for some of the stuff that you loved about it in the first place. And that's very, very difficult, I think, to maintain. And I'm trying to make a conscious effort to like reserve some of that awe I used to have, or what music did to me, or it does to everyone, really. And the first couple of years, I worked literally 16 hours per day, 7 days a week before I had kids, like even Christmas, like 7 days for years. And eventually it just, I was like, oh, this is not fun anymore at all. Like, and then I started, like, your hobby is dead too, because I used to play in a band, and well, I'm not gonna mix music for 16 hours and then go into the rehearsal room to tell the other guys how to play the instrument. Because for them it's just fun, and they just come there like once a week or twice a week and just jam. And I'm like, okay, well, we've been there last week already, and now we have to go back 2 hours and just to get to the same point where we were last time. And it was so fucking annoying that I quit the band eventually, and decided I need a hobby outside of music. And so I started doing Muay Thai and working out, and that's something I can only recommend. Not necessarily Muay Thai, but like doing something that is not music. If you work in the industry, or if you want to work in the music business as a musician or as a producer, engineer, whatever, reserve some space in your head and in your life for something that is not music and that is entirely different, be it sports or whatever hobby. And that kind of made me appreciate my daily life as a producer and engineer much more again, because I all of a sudden was able to work and enjoy music more consciously again, because I had this other hobby, this other part of my mind that kind of took me out of all this every now and then. Right. And that's crazy important, I think. But it took me a good couple of years to realize that.
Did you happen? Was it Thai like from time ago, or did you Thailand? Did you take advantage of that at all when you were in Thailand?
Yeah, I didn't get the first part of the sentence there. Audio dropped out, but yeah, when I was in Thailand, I did train a little bit, not as much as I'd like to. But well, just didn't have enough time. That we were there for I think 3 weeks, which is a good amount of time. But yeah. I did train in Thailand, but it's not as much as I would have liked to. And I used to train a lot, and like everything I do is I'm going totally overboard with it and going crazy. And eventually I ended up teaching Muay Thai and fighting. And so that became not necessarily a job, but it became a thing that was so big again that it occupied too much space in my mind again. And eventually I had I've got cartilage damage in my knee, and I can't really, I'm going to be 40 soon, so I'm old, and I'm not going to be actively fighting anymore. So it's becoming a bit more of a hobby again now, rather than this obsession.
Right.
But yeah, I'm trying to do as much as I can still.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I wish this was an MMA podcast because I have a ton more questions about fighting. That's something I'm a huge fan of. But unfortunately, it is a music podcast, so I'm gonna try. I know exactly. Try to keep it to try to stay in my lane. But just a question really quick about guitar playing, because I'm a guitar player. So from coming from somebody who's profiling stuff and creating tones, if you were in the studio right now and somebody asked you basically to create an album, what would be your go-to guitar? Are you going for Gibson Les Paul? Are you going for a classic style of guitar? Are you going for a new metal guitar?
Hard to say without knowing the style and the player, really. Definitely can't go wrong with a Les Paul, obviously, but yeah, really, I would have to look at the player and at the style and the music they're doing. Like, I would start with a humbucker guitar in metal anyway.
Right.
Not saying you can't record metal with a single coil, but I would probably start with a humbucker guitar. And I'm a big fan of active pickups for modern and fast stuff, just because it has a bit of this built-in tube screamer kind of thing where it rolls off a little bit of lows.
Right.
And actually, like active pickups are like this whole thing. They are too scooped as bullshit. Actually, rather mid-forward. Like they've got the very highs rolled off and they've got the lows rolled off. And this low roll off makes them very tight for like thrashy palm mute playing. But then again, if it's more like sludgy, doomy kind of stuff, I wouldn't use an active pickup at all. I would just use an old, whatever, PAF type humbucker or something. So yeah, I don't have a go-to really.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I think there's always ton of different tools for the job, and everybody has the guitar that they swear by. I got some crazy stuff in here. I don't even know if I should show this to you right now, but I figured might as well. Like, I'm doing a demo on this thing right now.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it
looks sick.
This is probably the most incredible guitars I've ever played. And it's crazy how it looks different, but it's insane, right? And it's a builder in New York, and he ended up sending it to me for a demo. And it's just incredible how far guitars have come. But it's just like they took the foundation of guitars and just went up and up and up and up and up, and now it's like it's just like amplifiers, and it's just like everything else. There's so much of it that nobody even knows where to start. You just get hit over the head with how many choices you have now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just keep telling people the same thing. Just pick up your guitar, plug it in, and play, and then figure out the sound later. Just try to play as best you can.
Yeah, and it's often, I think in a guitar, what's more important than, like, people go off about, amount of strings, obviously, and pickups and woods, but there's so much, like, little details that are more important, like the neck angle. Or, like, the most important thing for me is, before you even talk about pickups, like, all those guys have their custom guitars designed, or their dream guitars made by ESP or whatever, and they talk about pickups and woods. And what no one ever talks about is, like, the distance between the bridge pickup and the bridge, for example, which to me is like the one key thing that defines if a guitar is really tight and fast tracking on the low end. Like, to go to the extreme examples, if you got your bridge pickup and you do the thrashy palm mute stuff, switch to the neck pickup and do the same, and it sounds entirely different, obviously, because it's in a different spot. And I think that's what makes a massive difference between guitars, like how close the pickup is to the bridge. And I want my pickup to be very, very close to the bridge to get this high gain, tight, thrashy, like fast tracking palm mutes, like machine gun type of palm mutes. And that obviously wouldn't sound too great if you play clean. You want to pick up a bit further in, but yeah, for thrashy stuff. And that's why I like the old DSPs, for example, because they've got the pickup a bit closer to the bridge compared to Jackson's, for example. And no one ever talks about that, but that's, for me, it's like one of the most important things. Gibson Les Paul, for example, has got a bridge pickup close to the bridge as well. And there's actually going to be a Lasse Lammert's signature guitar that's coming out really soon from a German custom luthier. It's called Ziggy Braun.
Okay.
And he's doing awesome guitars. And that one, we designed that about a year ago. And I had Dan Goldsworthy help me with that. He's doing artwork for Accept and Cradle of Filth and tons of bands, and also for the Elstorm stuff.
Oh, nice.
And since I've always been like a big fan of the Explorer shape, and I love the Kelly shape, it's kind of a mix between those two. And working with Ziggy Brown on like my signature model enabled me to get all those little details in, like, for example, the distance between the bridge and the pickup. So this hopefully is going to be like the perfect guitar for me. We'll see.
Oh, nice. How long until they're actually available for purchase? I'd love to see one.
That's a good question. It was supposed to be released already, so but it's not. I guess like the whole Corona thing has slowed things down for everyone.
Right.
But it's in the process. It should be done very soon, really. Yeah, for people who follow me on Facebook and stuff, I'm definitely going to post about it. It's going to be. I think there's going to be a limited run for like half price in the first year or something, and it's in like I said, between Kelly and Explorer shape. It's a neck through design, fixed bridge tunematic, and it's got Fishman Fluence pickups in it, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be neon green.
Nice.
Nice.
Is that just your you wanted?
I'm just so black guitars are, I don't want to say boring, but like we all started with the same cheap guitars, like the BC Rich Bronze series and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And or Ibanez, whatever, like the cheaper RG series 350 or whatever. And they're all black. Like cheap guitars are black. And so that's still kind of in my head, like a black guitar, worse even with a chrome hardware, looks cheap to me. So I'm trying to get away from that. And I do have a couple of guitars with like a nice flame maple top, and that looks great. But I like that on like a Les Paul or something. But on this more heavy shaped guitar, I wanted to go with a solid color and figured like Kawasaki green or like the Loch Ness green would be amazing for heavy guitar with like points and stuff.
All right.
So
that's funny. That's a very loud color. Yeah, I was just interested in how you ended up picking that. Yeah, I think
you can, like, if you get one of them, you can choose your own color. You don't have to necessarily go with the Kawasaki green.
Oh, okay. I thought it was going to be like limited run, just straight up green guitars. That which would have been fun.
Don't think so.
Yeah,
maybe.
I pick black guitars and like faded guitars and things like that. Like I'm more about the wood grain than I am about even the color of the guitar. So I have possibly the most subtle guitars ever. I don't have the personality to play an awesome Kawasaki green guitar, unfortunately. But well, dude, Lasse, thank you so much for joining me, man. I'm gonna let you go. For everybody who doesn't know, it's 2 a.m. here in Southern California. It's
thanks for having me.
Lasse. No, of course, man. No, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation, man. It's so great to pick your brain. I wish I had 6 more hours to just talk to you about everything, dude, because it's so awesome. You seem to be on the same page when it comes to metal. So I'm a huge fan. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll catch up with you. And like I said, for everybody watching, be on the lookout for that German boutique pack that he's releasing. It sounds absolutely amazing.
Thanks for having me. Absolutely, my pleasure.
We'll catch you soon. Thanks, man.